Well, Ellen, I'm so happy to connect with you in this way, and looking forward to seeing what emerges.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I contacted you and wanting to be able to have a conversation is because of some of the things I know about you in terms of your sharing is so incredibly inclusive and unafraid of, and not only that, maybe at least open to
Yeah.
exploring what is in the shadow and unknown to itself. And that, yeah, I'd like to ask you about your own, what leads you to do the work you do, but also where you're maybe your own edges within yourself with your own
Mm,
practice, your own life.
that's big question, Susanna. But maybe
Yeah,
we'll start and then maybe see where I go with that. But
yeah.
I mean, I ha I think, I think my sort of way with the so-called non-dual offering has at heart remained the same because there's only one understanding. So of course that never changes and it's ever present. But I within it, or I don't know how to say it, but there's been quite a big evolution or transformation, or I don't know what to call it, realignment over the years. Um, yeah. And I've had to sort of come down, if I'm to stay simple with what that would be, it's like as a younger woman who was conditioned under patriarchy, uh, I had this very great spiritual longing, and I encountered the non-dual teaching, and my teacher was a man, and um, the way I received it and then the way I began to share it was sort of still at first that woman who was conditioned by patriarchy, who was sometimes parroting the male teacher, perhaps fearful and even not knowing what it is that this body mind, how does she do it, and who
Mm.
am I didn't know myself, I was so anyway. It's taken me, and it continues to be, it's always going to be edgy for me, because
Mhm.
even though I know my essential nature, I really feel more and more that Ellen, the wave called Ellen, is on a journey, and that journey is far from over, and um, includes has to include wherever life comes find me, and life tends to find us in the places that we least expect or haven't yet explored, or so yeah, I don't know, say something,
Yeah.
come in, come in.
Yes. So how did you get to enter the journey of wanting to embrace that which was unknown to yourself and unconscious in the shadow? And
Mm.
how did you come to embrace non-duality to that extent? And
Well, I
how do
think
you do it now? Yeah.
in my case I had started on a psychological journey before I encountered the non-dual understanding. So I think I was always drawn, and it's in my astrology chart
Oh,
that
yeah.
yeah,
What
I
does it
can't.
say? What does it
Well,
say?
I have lots of planets in, I think it's the fifth house, and Mercury and Mars, and really I can't remember because I'm not an astrologer, but I am somebody who always wants to go down there, down
Uh-huh.
dig and sniff around in the place of uncertainty, in the place that's a little bit dark or very dark. And
Yeah.
I'm always on the qui vive or on the lookout for that. So I think that was always in my makeup. Even as a kid, I was always in my family, and then later on as a young woman, or I struggled. I had many, well, not many, but I had psychological difficulties, which led me into therapy, into all sorts of explorations that were already to do with, with exploring the psyche and the body.
Mm.
But then I was also somebody who just wanted to check out a little bit and not check out, no. I am somebody who's very spiritually drawn. That's
Mm.
always been the case too. As a little girl, I could see the Virgin Mary when I went to church, and I loved Jesus and all that kind of thing. And that was a very pure side to my
Mm.
makeup. And I think they were at odds. So when I met the non-dual teaching, perhaps for a while, I was like, no, like all that psychological stuff
Mm.
can dissolve and sort of melt away. Because now, now all I have to do is just take my stand as aware, whatever it was that I was hearing in those days. But it was a huge relief, and it was a genuine relief,
It was a support at the time, sounds
as
like.
support, and it was a truth. So, and that hasn't shifted. It was a truth, and it was
Mhm.
profound, and it rippled through my system. It had an effect on me. But eventually, that other Ellen, I would sit in satsang and, sort of abide or feel the peace of my true nature or feel the openness or, all that good stuff. But eventually, another side of myself came back online. She was still online, very much so, and she was all sorts of things. She was alive. She was a woman. She was angry. She was sad. She was struggling. She was confused. And so for a long time, I was wrestling with that. And I was trying to find, I was
Mhm.
asking questions, in satsang, trying to understand what is the interface with this sort of vertical, absolute understanding, and then this horizontal line of Ellen and of everybody else, really the person. And I never could quite res get. I always felt, however beautiful the teachers were, it was never like a place where I felt resolved. And so I think over the years, and then when I started sharing, and then I was very interested in the Jungian
Mm.
approach, which is more, you could say, the horizontal. I began to let go of the need to absolutely reconcile and understand that there was a sort of living paradox, and that and I became interested in that paradox
Mhm.
of living in all sorts of different realms, really, and not being in such a hurry to this direct path, the non-dual direct path. Yes, yes, but also no.
Can you
It's
can you name it? The just in brief, the name, what do you mean, just for anyone who's listening who in their own way they might know what you mean, but what do you mean by direct path and non-dual and what you got, what that
mm,
is for you and versus the horizontal?
well, then I guess the non-dual direct path is what I encountered when I met my teacher. And my teacher, I can say, is Francis Lucille, and he's in the tradition of Advaita, which is an Indian tradition, which is really quite devoid of practices and sadhanas. It's not really a process or a progressive process where you start and then you do things so that you arrive somewhere. It's a it's a very experiential inquiry through which you realize you. In other words, that which you are, the deepest sense of yourself, awakens to itself.
Mm.
It, I'm sure those of
Yeah,
you who
that's
join,
good. That's good.
yeah.
And
And
then
it's called direct because it's it's a sort of line of inquiry, or it's a process of experiential inquiry. It can be tactile. It doesn't have to be through thinking, but it goes straight to the heart of the matter.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it really doesn't. It's not interested in. the psyche or
Hmm. It's what always is, regardless of what's taking place.
so the content, exactly. The content of experience is not in the foreground of the direct path. What's in the foreground is
Mhm.
the reality of the content of experience, the underlying reality of all things.
Yeah. So once that's been understood and realized, then there's this horizontal piece for many, for you, not for everybody, that wants to be also known and integrated and included.
Well, for me, it was like Ellen never disappeared, and I don't want Ellen to disappear. I like Ellen, and I always had this sense, well, yes, I am that. So I know that somehow I know it.
Mm.
And Ellen, I am Ellen. And so I understood very clearly and know for sure that there is no separation. There is no separate self. There's no separate consciousness.
Uh-huh.
I always like the image of the wave and the ocean because it's so simple and that's how I see it. A wave, everything in creation is a wave and its reality is the ocean, but those waves ripple and they have a trajectory. They have, a wave has
Mhm.
a trajectory. And so a human life and an animal life, every life is part of this creation and it's important. It's not for nothing. And this is maybe then another aspect that I didn't find so much. Maybe that's more the tantric piece where this sort of reverence. I felt and I feel a deep reverence for life, for creation. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
but not just because its reality is the absolute, but also because of because of what it holds that is yet to be discovered, because of its movement, because of what it reveals, which I don't know. I mean, I know as I as I live,
Mhm.
I discover and therefore that includes then a quality of curiosity, a quality of humility, which I sometimes don't find in non-dual
Mhm.
circles. Sometimes I have been bothered by a certain hubris sometimes of, this sort of idea that all I need to do is X, Y, Z, and then there I am, abiding as awareness. And I think that's really, really misleading. At least it was for me, and I can see for others.
Mhm.
I'm saying a lot, Suzanne, so maybe
Okay.
you'd
No,
like
I
to.
like hearing you, and I feel like it's good to listen.
Yeah,
It's good to listen.
yeah. And I don't think I can only speak from my experience, right?
Mhm.
I I also, yeah. I'm very interested in the psyche. So I'm not really interested in therapy the way therapy might be understood in our mainstream culture, but I've been very interested in the psyche in the sense that Carl Jung maybe would meant and
Mhm.
others, but where the psyche is really God,
Mhm.
God's mind, you could say. And so psychological work is is sacred because it's really wanting to integrate whatever you're meant to integrate. We can't integrate everything, and we can't integrate all the polarities that move through us. But we can, each one of us, it's like we'll have a certain something, will a certain theme or a certain and it might change. I mean, and we'll have dreams, and the dreams may have a certain vocabulary, and all of that feels like a sort of relationship. It's like a relationship with our own inner face of God, which is there's only one, but it sort of shines differently within each one. Maybe that's what people mean by the soul or the self with a big S. So yeah, so I feel quite strongly about all that. Very strongly. about the importance
Hmm.
of that inquiry.
Yeah, so much has been denied, it feels strongly for itself, perhaps, to be included and seen and known.
Exactly. And exactly. And, you know, I think it's cultural too that our modern culture is a disaster. Honestly, you know,
Yeah.
our Western modern culture is a disaster. And, you know, I say that, but that's a little bit maybe arrogant to say because it's happening. So there must, I don't understand what's happening must have meaning, but it seems very disastrous and quite meaningless. And you know, my very simplistic analysis is that the Western modern culture hasn't put the human being at its center, has forgotten anything to do with belonging to the totality and a sense of the transcendent and a sense of being equal with all other aspects of creations. And then, you know, obviously that's paved the way for incredible this imbalance in the system, the capitalist system, technology and all that. But even in the spiritual systems, I think we have to be careful because we think in the non-dual circles, we think, well, there is no person, there's no separate self. I am aware that actually there's it's there's such a risk of a spiritual ego taking a hold of that understanding and running with it. And I'm losing my way here, but I'm
Yeah.
saying a lot, but
Yeah, there's such a risk. It sounds like there's a common theme in terms of being lost, you know, that
mm-hmm,
um, human beings are lost
mm-hmm,
for the most part, and they're lost in technology, and they're lost in feeling separate. They're
yes,
lost in terms of not feeling connected to one another and to life.
yes,
The fact that we don't know ourselves as part of nature is a huge problem,
yes,
and we're destroying the world because of it. And
yes.
um, and then that, as you were pointing out, in terms of spirituality, I think that there's a time and place for, at least for me, there was of understanding and feeling the liberation similar to you of the transcendent.
Mm-hmm,
But my nature has always been to want to be here. And how does that now be here? And that's a journey that's still evolving. That's probably till the last breath,
oh yeah,
being here and um and being here consciously. So
mm-hmm,
much of what you were speaking about, which I also am in different ways than yourself, I'm sure, but the unconscious is very interesting to me.
mm-hmm,
And when something bubbles up and is becoming conscious, to me, that's like life. That's
yes,
it's full of juice. And it's like, to me, that's the leading edge of living,
that's beautiful.
is being here as much as possible fully with my yes,
Yeah.
with my yes. And I think that there's a power to for life to be born consciously through,
During our,
yes, here within us. And
yes,
it's the prayer of life, so okay, so you have a transcendent understanding and it liberates, and everyone will have a different level of how maybe deep that goes in terms of not feeling like there's a self here.
mm,
And I have this really living theory for me that as above, so below. and equally as so below as above. So my experience is that the more that there's been an emptying of feeling like there's a self here over time, there's been a descent in equal ability to actually be fully alive and present, to being here
Mhm.
without rejecting it, because that protection is no longer needed of hiding. If there's no separate self sense, and it's really been emptied out to a large degree, then it can really appear.
Mhm.
The invitation is to appear.
Yeah. I mean, I like how you say it. Maybe in my case, um, there's this deep curiosity, which is, I know, not coming from separation. This, and it's coming from life itself, life wanting to know itself. But in my case, often it's precisely at the place of no or fear or whatever, confusion and chaos that appears. Um, and for a while, I might get lost in it, and in a way, need to get lost in it. Perhaps I don't know. In other words, I'm not in a rush because I trust this thing, this mad life. So there might be this moment
Mhm.
where actually it is it is feeling very separate and very contracted, and I'm very much in a reaction, and my index is pointing very strongly towards whoever or whatever. And
Mhm.
but because of this sort of background, curiosity, willingness, devotion, or I don't know what to call it, but sort of devotion to life, and life here meaning the same thing as non-duality or reality or truth, or because it's there at some point quite soon, and maybe sooner and sooner now, some other movement, some inquiry, some bringing it into a space where I can really allow it to surface, because a lot of it is often, a lot of this sort of difficult material that appears in our lives, it's in semi-obscurity, and it's mostly in the unconscious. And that takes time. That's not, and I know you know that. It takes time. It requires something, a certain humility. I love that word, humus, the earth. It's work that requires the body, it requires humility, it requires, I don't know, it requires lots of things. And we
Mm.
can't just reach for that spiritual, that
Mm.
high spiritual knowledge at that moment. It's precisely perhaps what we shouldn't reach for. Because if we reach for it, then very likely we're reaching for it so we can sort of, I don't know, reform the bubble, the spiritual bubble, and take a shower and clean all that stuff, and
But
off we
it,
go.
but it might also be because I mean, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, because I think people have more capacities than they know and can exercise and practice.
Mm,
I just had an online meeting with Open Circle, and it was titled The Wisdom of No Escape.
mm,
And it's about this, just the wisdom of not moving and not abandoning what's right here. Because if you stay long enough and you just don't move, it is
it moves. If you
not
don't
only
move, it
not
moves.
only that, but it's sublime in its density. It's just an idea we hold inside of
Mm,
what uncomfortable even means. Is uncomfortable, that's a label. It's
right.
just vibration, it's energy, it's sensation. It's unknown to itself. So just the wisdom of no escape, staying, remaining. But what I was going to say is that, one, I think people have more capacity than they know, but it's something that may need to be actually supported and helped and taught how to do this. I taught myself. Sounds like you taught yourself. And of
Tantric way taught me as well.
What's that?
The Kashmir tantric yoga taught me
Hmm.
to be with on on more of a tactile level, more like
Okay.
with extreme resistance or discomforts, which is what you're, I think, describing as
Yeah.
escape, not moving, and then discovering that things come back to life. Because the label we have on any experience that we resist, it sort of crystallizes that experience. It can't live. It's just been labeled. It's just inert. But then as soon as we welcome it, as you know, as you say, it's back. It reunites with the totality, and that is sublime because it's the return home. And I like that word sublime.
Yeah. All of that is my experience as well. What I was going to say is that I think one of the reasons, Ellen, that other than people having more capacity than they know, of maybe going back to the safe zone
Yeah.
of that which is free, in the midst, free, just transcendent in order to touch on it, is because there's maybe still a bridge being built
Yeah.
of because some of that content is too much to deal.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I actually think this back and forth is, I do it. I don't know that that's, I think I was, I think I have I wasn't meaning that earlier. I meant that in some cases, there's a spiritual ego that's taken a hold of the non-dual teaching and has run with it and is not at all interested in doing anything more
Oh,
than just.
right. Of
So
course.
that's what I was talking about. But this back and forth,
Mm.
I mean, I think I do it all the time. It's almost like a dance. It's like the wave sometimes, dissolving back into the ocean. And when I, guide meditations with my small groups, it's, I love it because I get to just experience that return and then the wave reappears and the content of experience surfaces and is welcomed, is experienced. And then, you have this sort of amazing freedom to dance with the absolute and with the more relative. And I find that very beautiful and a very nice thing. Nice is not the word, but important thing for people to have permission
Yeah,
to.
and to know that this is like an evolutionary edge of life itself, wanting to really be here
Yeah,
consciously, like
yeah,
being the wave and the wave moving through space time in our
yeah.
life, you know, is there's always a new now moment of what it's encountering and what it can open to and what is being asked to be open to. And
Mhm.
it's this very sublime,
Yeah,
very sublime.
such
You
a
know,
beautiful. It's
God, it's such aliveness. How
Mhm.
nothing boring. Nothing boring. I can feel it now just speaking with you, that these things are arising within and being met just immediately in the moment of
And
allow.
maybe that's yes. And I make another distinction, but it's a bit conceptual. But there's the in the now sublimity, sublimeness. I don't know how you say
Why
it,
not? Why not?
of what you're describing.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, you could say that for me is something I experience, especially when I gather with people or when I sit in meditation, where I really sort of leave, sort of fold time space back into something more simple. The now is ever present, but when you go to meditation or to closing your eyes and just being here now, you're no longer busy with your life. And so in those moments, and it's more internal, and you're maybe welcoming feelings and sensations and even thoughts, but you're not out on the marketplace wrestling with whatever you wrestle with in life. So it's a privileged moment, you could say, the moment of where you really, really, you should. I mean, I feel like, yeah, it's a spa. You come to meditation, it's like so lovely. We're together, first of all, so we do it together, which is like highest ritual that could be to share this. And then, but then you go out, you know,
I hear
into
you. And then it gets practiced in the
exactly.
everyday,
Yeah.
in the everyday. Just
Yeah.
at least for me, my experience is layers upon layers of awareness, layers upon layers of awareness taking place in any moment. And what is being paid attention to in the moment? There might be a need for functioning in a certain way, right? There might
Mhm.
be a seeing into another. There might be feeling deeply. There might be just noticing what's taking
Mhm.
place inwardly or outwardly, the light on the trees, whatever. But there are layers upon layers of awareness, and that are even at times simultaneously
Mhm.
aware.
Mhm.
So consciousness has great capacity to be in awareness, especially I think as one opens more and more to being a sensing being,
Mhm.
just being a sensing being rather than so focused on thinking. So if one is more moving through life in a sensing way, it's there's a rich tapestry kind of, it's
Absolutely.
penetrated, it's 3D, 4D, whatever D, it's going
Yeah.
down in, and perception and the aliveness doesn't have to be labeled, is not labeled through sensing. So then it's just it's a fluctuating kind of experience of being alive and aware and awake now
Yes.
in a
And
felt way, in a
yes.
felt way.
Yes, 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 yes.
And then you
Yes.
can see, oh, this is kind of where it stops right now. It doesn't, there's a place inside that is not sure. There's a place inside that is just learning about this moment and, but open. And if it's
Mm.
not open, then open to not being open, right? At least
Yeah.
in its tone. And I think that's something that as men and women can do, but it seems like a very feminine uh, kind of
Sensitivity or
yeah, a sensitivity and something that is, as both you and I know, as teachers doing what
mm,
we do,
mm,
um, is there's an awakening, it seems to me, of of individuals who are it's gaining some momentum of being interested in this
mm,
types of going and feeling intimately, being
mm,
being here,
right.
right? And not being lost in being here, because that's part of what the transcendent and waking up to what we are in truth, what it offers is that one can actually be here without being lost. That's when I think one of the reasons why when we feel like when we believe that we're really a separate self, there's
Mm,
such a fear of getting lost and be in feeling and sensation. So there's a defense that takes place.
mm,
And
mm,
this defense melts if one brings uh, this beautiful openness of knowing that there's no separate self at the core. It
mhm,
maybe it's still getting to know that fact through life experience, but at the core, there's really truly there's an empty space. It's empty.
mhm, mhm,
So then one can go into life, really into life. This is, you know, and and then be here in a way that I think we're meant to be. We're really meant to feel that
mhm,
aliveness and be here as much as fully. And I think there's a movement with some individuals like you and I have people that, we work with, and other people may be doing similar work, but still, of course, the main focus, it seems, and not making it wrong, Ellen, but you and I, we know this intimately, that the main focus still seems to be on we can say more masculine kind of angle,
Mhm.
which we have benefited to at some point in our lives with opening to that transcendent. But there's still this kind of escapism, maybe,
Yes.
of being of not really honoring and valuing the being here part and valuing more than actually the not being here.
Yeah. Up there part.
And that's still the predominant
I,
and I'm not
no, no, I know you're
making
not.
a criticism or complaining. I want to just say it out loud. Not that it hasn't been said, but I just want to say it out loud and lay it out there because this is part of what's um, unhealed in within humanity and within and it's showing up in the way we treat each other, Mother Earth, with division, with
Right.
how can you even how can you even create pain and suffering with wars? Like all that is an emergence out of the sickness of this not valuing what this
Body,
is.
feminine, the body, the feeling, the
The
feeling.
body of Mother Earth, the
And it
body.
doesn't mean that maybe the some of the transcendent teachings um, are not experiential either, but and in fact, and you know, there is the tantric tradition, which is just as many men as women teaching, maybe in the Indian tantric tradition, is what you're describing, the tactile understanding, you know, at a tactile level, at a feeling level, at a body level, and heart and body, or but understanding, you know, literally with your senses that you're that there isn't that you're part of a totality. You feel it, and but you don't feel it. Of course, you don't feel it because you've been conditioned not to feel it. So, the first exploration is to just to explore. What do I feel? What do I feel? You know, to be very. I mean, at least that's
Let
how
me
I.
let me ask you this. So, because we both have had a foot in the non-dual world, okay,
Mhm.
and understand it to some degree, I think. Um, if you were to speak to anyone here, maybe listening, who hasn't made a shift into this world of really embracing being here, you know, the humanity, what would be the invitation of why this would be of value and important?
I don't know if I have an answer to that because I wouldn't. Let me just think for 2 seconds. I mean, in a way, if I had to say why it's of value, because I would tend not to say, I would tend to wait for people to come, you know, to come to that somehow, to come to have that longing to reconnect with something.
No, you can't make it happen, but I'm inviting you.
Yeah, yeah. But in a way, I'd say something like you were saying. I'd say, well, why is it of value? Because that's where life's at. You know, life is here, you know,
But
here.
what if someone says, I'm playing little devil's advocate, not that I can really do that well. I'm gonna try it. What if someone's because I mean, of course, this is part of the, you know, what's out there. So energetically, like what if someone says and they don't understand yet that they've heard it and maybe they say, yeah, 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 the divinity's informed too. You know, God is imminent, but they haven't yet, they don't believe, like they still their camp is still in the transcendent and they're listening. If they've gotten this far, they're interested. They would have left, you know, from the beginning.
I mean, I probably would say something quite simple. I'd say, you know, if you have an intuition of your true nature, which is not that you're not separate and your your essential identity is free of borders and openness itself. I would say, don't you want to feel that more? You know, don't you want to feel that more? And hopefully they would say, yes, I do. And I'd say, well, that means you have to go also to the body and to the felt sense, because the conditioning, the belief in separation is not just a conceptual belief, it's a feeling belief. It's a very much in the body. So I would say, come explore the body if you want, because that
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
needs to be. I mean, I hate that word purified in this sense, but it's not that it needs to be purified. Nothing needs to be purified, but if you explore your body, you're going to encounter the conditioning of separation, and that will be
Yeah.
such a gift, such a treasure, because when you encounter for example, the feeling, I don't know, of being located inside a physical body, like a body bag, and then you can challenge. It's like, okay, wait, let me just feel the edges of my body. Really, can I really trace the border between this me feeling and not me? And then, and there are all sorts of inquiries that you can do, and they pave the way to such beautiful, sublime um, revelations of what is already and always the case.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I really want to be careful, because I don't like to paint this sort of. I think I'm always wanting to defend not the separate self, but the personal self. It's like, and maybe here, maybe you're more. I don't know. Maybe you and I are a little bit different that way. Um, like that. I don't know what I'm trying to say, really. It's got nothing to do with the inquiry with the body. The inquiry with the body is so important, and as you said, nature, and trees and the earth and the air and the animals, and you know science and non-duality have just done this whole thing on indigenous healing, and I don't know if you saw their film, or if some of the people who are listening here, and it's not the place to talk about it, but I watched this film, and I really
Mm.
saw how far we've come from our own indigenous natures in our
Yeah.
Western,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I
and
don't I don't know
yeah.
where we differ. I mean, it's good to have differences, in my opinion. I love
Or
the edges of differences. Um, yeah, and I'm learning about you, and just in our conversation, we're learning about each other. Um,
maybe it's not so much about agreement or disagreement. It's just we're going to express it a bit differently, and
of
you know,
course, what I discovered, Ellen, is that so I was a very physical kind of person growing up, did a lot of um non-harming sports. I was very active, and soccer and volleyball and all this stuff. And then I got into yoga when I was like 21, and did a yoga teacher training, and I got swept up into meditation as well. So I was also doing meditation within my practice of asana, where I went into the felt sense, just, in every posture. And there was a conditioning that was being released, and I went through different types of healing crises because of it, like where stored memory and felt experience was wound up, and that continued kind of into years later of my practice, in terms of the body being one and a part and parcel of my journey. But there were times when I would go more into the transcendent, because there was a desire to know who I really am, and it was organic. And then it went back into inclusion and complete inclusion. Okay, so what about this here now? Is this it too? That was always my question. And is this it too? And it would be a yes. And over time, I just discovered that the doer had been also the separate self, what you said earlier, which I really heard when you said it, the separate self in the body sense, that it was in the body, and that wanted to be met as well with love, because the heart had bloomed. It wasn't just an awareness awakening, it was a heart understanding. And the heart loves all of itself and it doesn't leave anything behind. So then there was this reconciliation process and love.
And you know what it makes me think of? Am I interrupting you?
Oh no, it's just that I wanted to just say this
I,
and
I love the love. I love
yes.
the love word, and it makes me think of. I often use the
Mhm.
image of visible mother when in the meditations, and I have this feeling that it's to do with the mother. You know, I mean, it's the mother being yet another name for oneness, or but this sort of mother, sort of unconditional mother, inclusive. You used the word inclusion earlier, and that is not something emphasized maybe by certain non-dual contemporary teachings. Um, because when I say mother, I mean actually using imagery when you're guiding meditations that really evoke something loving and warm and, you know, something in which all these areas of separation can feel safe enough to unfold, unfurl, let go of what's been held, which might mean that a story needs to be told or tears need to be shed or a movement of anger needs to explode. You know, it's just
Mm.
this very, I don't know how to sort of, the mother who loves her creation. I think that's what you're saying, you know, that she
Yeah,
loves every corner of her creation, some
yes.
even the
Yes,
dark.
every corner of our creation, and since we're human beings, we have our unique kind of ways of the passage of expression. We have tears, we have laughter, we have anger, we have these different things been labeled, but these are the way that the movement can take place of of release and also
But
just
also dream image, because there's also what comes from the unconscious that's not necessarily in meditation, but the night dream with symbols and images that if you pay attention, you know, that's also in a way the if you become interested in your dreams, for example, and that's not just it might be another movement of the of life of this embracing and it's a symbolic you're just exploring it not in uh, you sort of with your imagination, that's it. So we have this function, the imagination, which is divine, you know, and where we can paint a dream and then have a dialogue with a dream image, in particular the dark figure there that we wanted to ignore in our dream, and all of that is driven in a way by seems to be driven by the person, but actually you can trust it. You know, it's as long as you don't go, I'm going to work on my dreams and get to the bottom of it. Then you're like, I don't know about that. But if it's a, you know, you can tell, we can tell when it's egoic, like I need to get,
yeah. Yeah,
or when,
that's the core of maybe what when you said maybe we're I don't know if this is the core of where our difference lies. Maybe it's just that that's not what am I trying to say? Um, you know how I said earlier about as above, so below,
yes,
that I still can't find a separate self, even when it's like a movement of, let's say, anger comes through, or anything that's touched, even if it's um, unconscious, a bit unconscious. Let's say there was some ignorance that
yeah.
was expressed, okay?
Hmm.
And it's like learning through that,
Hmm.
learning through ignorance still being able to be
So, but at
expressed.
the
There's still,
moment where there's ignorance, at the
mhm.
moment where there's ignorance, in that moment, I get what you're saying, you know, I think,
It's not a belief, and it's not at all like I want what's true,
yeah, yeah, I can tell.
you know. I absolutely want to know to the depths of what's true, and I won't stop. I would never pretend just to, you know, be seen in a certain way. No, I absolutely want to know what's true. If there's some kind of something that is so still believing in itself as separate within
Right.
the moment, it,
So that moment of ignorance, for example,
yeah,
however, that's a little moment where you're ignoring your true nature, right?
no, that's not how I see it. Yeah, no, this is good. That moment is, it's really truly, it's its own living leading edge of becoming conscious.
But I understand what you're saying. I I think it's just it's almost like semantics in a way,
Perhaps maybe semantics, but and
but also
maybe
maybe I have more interest in the person than
yeah,
I
the
feel like,
person,
yeah.
sorry, the
No,
person is not, the person to me is rich, but there's no separate self in the person. And
that's
that
yeah.
and the rich and then the richness is an expression. It doesn't have to be limited by
Mhm.
knowing that, by that knowing itself as, just it can
Mhm.
be, to me, it's drawing itself into existence in the moment, you know?
Yeah, I think I sign my name under what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
I think I've come to not worry, I know there's no separation. I know it. But and I also know that this game of hide and seek that life likes to play or reality likes to play with itself is a big game, it's like
It's a
huge.
big game. How
And so
hidden, yeah, can it
when
be?
when it plays out in me, I don't think I ever forget the truth, but I let myself seem to forget the truth because I don't know how to say it. I've never been able to really formulate it. But one example, which maybe will say it all, is that I have re-entered Jungian analysis for myself. Uh, it's been a few years now, and I go and I'm really enjoying the exploration. And my analyst is not a non-dual. She's not a non-dualist or whatever you call them. But the intention is so not to affirm separation. And yet we talk a great deal or explore dreams and memories and whatever is arising in life. And it's very fertile. And the relationship that we have with each other, it's extremely alchemical. So all of that to me, I know it serves life because it's in the service of, as you were saying, it's an edge and it's bringing, I don't know how you said it, but it's bringing, integrating things more and more into wholeness, into the in my own little way. But it requires me to allow for talking about places that are contracted or and lingering there maybe more than I might have in the past or
Yeah.
more than I would have allowed myself because I was spiritual and I was non-dual. And
Mm. Yeah,
so
you're
I
freeing yourself of that, all that. Yeah.
can't bear
I
it anymore.
understand. I so understand.
Mm.
To me, life, my inner experience is like a symphony.
Mm. That's
And
lovely.
there's this low tones, and it's times it's a little bit like or it's sublime. It just goes, it's just always in the moment doing its thing. And there's, you know, um, that's my
Yes.
language, my inner language.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I welcome that in others.
Mm.
I welcome that in others, even if they don't know that about that freedom is inclusive to that degree. I
Mm.
still, it's all welcomed. And
Mm.
do I remind myself that for myself, I no longer need to remind myself ever.
Right. Right.
So once one no longer needs to remind oneself, in my opinion, then one can go into what you have expressed, what I'm understanding you as expressing, of there's no need to.
Yeah. But I think, okay, so yes, 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 yes. But there's a but there, but I don't know what it is yet.
Okay, okay. You go ahead.
I don't know exactly. So I think it's what I went through when I divorced, which it was a difficult, I won't get into it, but it was a very difficult divorce. And I wasn't able to just rely on the non-dual teaching. And I really had to ask myself very um, basic human questions and ethical questions and moral questions and what to do with this feeling and how should I do this or should I do that? And I had to wrestle with a lot.
Mhm.
And I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. It was a very basic, very difficult time. And it's been incredibly formative and transformative. And the non-dual teaching, such as I received it, had not much of a role in any of it. Funnily enough, I didn't really, I just had to let life shake me and push me and throw me down and I'm exaggerating and provide a little bit of something, and it was all very messy and chaotic and difficult. And now when I look back I can see the perfection of it, or not perfection of it, but the gift of it. And the so I think it humbled me. I thought, okay, yes, I understand things. I've been graced, or the I that we all are knows itself at times, or rather in timeless moments. There's just I am, but there's also a very human experience here that would rather not rely on any spiritual certainty, and would rather meet the people who come to me for sessions with not with certainty,
Mm.
um, but with my essence, like you. Like I just look at your face and the way you listen to me, and I feel like, yeah, that's I love your energy, and I think it's what you're doing. You're not, as you said earlier, you're not ever would never make it up, and probably I don't think you probably reach for formulations to meet people.
No, no. Um,
Can I just say one more thing? Because it's just, and now it's
yeah.
just that often come to me with this belief that something's wrong because they still feel a sense of, still feel, still, there's always, I still feel this. And so they have this sort of notion like what it should look like or feel like, and
Mm.
awakening. And I really, really mind for, I feel like, no, 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 like where you just be where you are, and start to feel that. And anyway, I'm rambling.
Yeah, no, but it's it's including again. It's not excluding a personal experience as if
Yeah.
that's not it too,
Yeah.
but it's without formulation. So just I think that that kind of holding is is through a deep lap, a wide, deep lap of the divine,
Lovely.
wide,
Deep.
deep lap of the divine that holds,
Oh,
and something's holding us. I just always feel like we're these nesting dolls of something's got our back and something's got that one's back and something's got that one's back, and we're all being able to rest in each other's lap and lean back and be held by the greatness of the vast lap,
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
to me, freedom, if like from the beginning, being drawn to freedom. And my personality also is still kind of like a rebel slash freedom person.
Rebel,
I'm a spiritual rebel for sure.
are
But it
you?
comes off really lovingly
Yeah.
because I think that there's a real heart
What's the
there.
rebel? Tell me about the rebel part.
Well, the rebel is I don't want to stop. I want what's real and what's real
Go for
freedom. And
go for the
the
jugular.
huh?
You're gonna go for the jugular.
Yeah, go for it all the way. And so what I discovered through this and discovering is how free really we are in terms of, and what that means is that one can really be here, right? Really be here. If you're not afraid of being lost,
Right.
you can really be here. And whether that is feeling as a person, even the self sense,
Yeah.
if one is not, if there's no more being lost, there's everything, even that I appearing, let's say it does,
It's a pure.
but it's not law, in the freedom, within the freedom, truthfully, not a made up kind of conceptual thing of blah, 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 to spiritual bypassing stuff, but just like the truth is everything rises and falls in that, and it does. And then everything's allowed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
there are those edges, and you've mentioned them, like edges in my case, and maybe people in general, of fear, the edge of fear, the edge of, the edge, certain edges
Yeah.
that that well, that are edgy. Edges are edgy,
But edges are you're to me, I see you also from the outside as a rebel.
Yes.
And part of it is the edges, dancing the edges. That's kind of that dancing the edges. Um, it's a type of archetypal personality, in a way, but it's so I see it as like part of the divine, the God, of wanting to explore your
Yeah.
being curious. And I think it's just like, that's part of the expansion of the universe energy.
Yeah. I
It's
love that.
curious about itself. It wants
Yeah.
to keep exploring and pushing
Yeah.
the edges. I
Yeah.
wonder what's over there.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I just, I love how you're speaking about it just now. And it reminds me of this period in the past few years where I've been quite alone. And that edge of what aloneness, how aloneness was encountered. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to express it, but it, the way you're saying now, I realize there was such a great curiosity really playing itself out with these very difficult experiences. But the willingness to be with and to welcome and to feel and to not know and to feel more and to be with and to not know, and the moment where you see that the welcoming alchemizes whatever was difficult. It's no longer difficult. It becomes, well, sublime maybe is too. But anyway, all of that has been in operation in a in a big way. And it's what you're describing. So it's both. It's like the edge is a sort of suffering, and suffering, you could say, has something of separation. When you suffer, separation is sort of there, and it's, I love this idea that it's because there's an edge there, but the curiosity and the willingness are also sort of bigger even. There's the
Hmm.
edge,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Yeah.
there's the
It's like
irrepressible.
it's surfing the edge and alchemizing it as it surfaces it. It alchemizes without the intention of alchemizing. It's just being
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, but I guess I'm always wanting to say to people, it's hard sometimes because when we say it like this, it's very beautiful, and
Of
it might
course.
send a message, oh, wow, alchemizing the edges and da, 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 da.
Oh no, it's
Saying,
it no. it's even while we're talking, I'm feeling stuff arise, right?
It's not.
Because we're going deep
Mm,
and we're feeling each other because we're both very empathic. So
mm,
we're feeling each other, and I sense for me sort of this growing edge inside right now, and it's being met in the moment because it's been trained to do that. But and I've learned how not to label something as uncomfortable, okay? But it's
yeah,
so new, the feeling that it could be labeled uncomfortableness and but it's not. For me, it's just like,
exactly. I get it, Suzanne.
yeah.
Suzanne.
So that's something to that, I had to learn and until it was really understood that it's safe
Yeah.
and good and uh that this is something I want to do. I
And
have
that the deep and
yes.
wide lap is here,
And the
always.
lap is here and yeah, because of that understanding of that we're really not separate, supports it,
Yeah.
but it could at times be so difficult that I would just often lay down
Yeah.
and just stay and learn how to stay with uncomfortableness and go
And
through it.
that's lovely. Because I think that's lovely to say that and for people to really hear that. It's
Yeah.
really have to lay down or sit and just allow, just the rawness of it, postpone the labeling and all that kind of thing. And just that, and it's like a bit like you're trained, you're becoming an athlete in spiritual.
Exactly. You learn to midwife yourself. It's really, and you can have a guide at times, that can help because
Well, I think we need each other big time. This is not for this is
faint
not,
of the hearts. Yeah, no, it's not. We need each other big time and we need cheerleaders too. Like, this is
oh,
the right
whatever.
way.
Yes.
All of it, all of it. So anyway, it is so
Yeah.
nice to be here with you. We've been here almost an hour. Do you think, is there more that you would like to share or places we want to go?
I can't, I could go on for a long time because it's lovely to talk to you, Susanne.
Yeah, same here.
Stop and resume another time. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll feel into it for a sec. It's funny. Me, the video person knows that people's attention spans last about 50 minutes.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't use watch. Sometimes you watch something, you watch it a bit, and then you watch the rest later on in the day. So
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Um, let me just sit. We can both sit for a minute and just feel. Yeah, you were saying that we need each other, and sometimes this kind of learning how to listen and the somatic work of learning to listen requires some assistance and help. And luckily, there are people out there more and more being able to help, in that kind of
yeah,
way.
yeah. And don't
Yeah.
you think? I mean, wasn't it the case for you that life provided you with the help?
What do you mean?
Well, you must have encountered some teachers, some teachings, and maybe some not so good, but some good, some
Oh, right, right. Oh,
help
those
when
kind
you.
of the teachers, they this kind of work that we're talking about right now of encountering and meeting oneself and what is here energetically is something I taught myself. But I know that since I started doing that self-learning, that different practices have come out, somatic kind of work, hakomi, different work, somatic work that maybe you do and that help people now. And nervous system support. That's something I did get help with, Ellen, is nervous system support. I got cranial work and something called network chiropractic. And then it's called network spinal analysis now. That is so good for releasing the nervous system is so
But
needing help because it's so hard to stop and be with something if the nervous system is overwhelmed.
exactly, yeah. Yeah.
So that might need help, support.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And you do dance, right? You dance.
Well, I was trained as a dance therapist, but really it's really movement. But
Yeah.
I've moved on from that, and I do other things.
Okay.
But in the groups, I it's very tactile, and sometimes we move, but it's not imposed. It's just letting the subtle movements, and that you could say that was more a feminine thing because the way I was taught, even the tactile, the Kashmir yoga, the non-dual Kashmir yoga, which Jean Klein, I don't know if you know Jean Klein and Eric Barret, they teach it, but it's very still, and you do the postures. And when I would teach it or share it, there's always this, and I always thought, no, 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 you have to stay still. I remember asking one of my teachers, male teachers, what about free movement? And he was like, no, 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 no. And but now I really, yeah, I let the body the body is movement, life is movement. So during the meditations we a lot often go from stillness to movement and back to stillness and sublime, that return from a subtle movement. And you don't return, it just takes itself back to where what just this openness. And that those are very subtle sharings, and they're very beautiful, and simple. Uh,
Mm,
saying that, I don't know.
mm. Well, I'm going to
Oh,
list
movement
your I'm going to
dance.
list your work in the if you're okay with that. Yeah, because I know some people who study with you and come to your classes and get a lot out of it. So I can tell. Yeah, what a gift. What a
Mm.
gift that you're offering and that you are
Oh,
coming
thank you.
what I
And
see, that I see,
it's
doing this work in life.
well, I feel like when we do what comes naturally, we
Mhm.
can't but not be gifts. And I know it's true of you too.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, we're just being ourselves here, right?
I think we must be.
Yeah. Being ourselves is showing up as ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll do a part two. We'll see.
Okay, well, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you. Let me just end the recording and we can